And now with breaking news, Theresa May has written a letter to the President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, asking for a Brexit extension until June the 30th this year. That also means the UK may need to participate in European Parliament elections in May. She stressed that the British Parliament will continue to work on finding a consensus to pass a Brexit deal and said if they succeed in doing so before June the 30th, the Brexit extension should be cancelled and European elections shouldn't be necessary. Well, I'm joined in the studio now by our journalist Isabel Kumar. What do we know about what Theresa May has just requested?
OK, so this is such a fast-moving situation. But look, let's have a look, put this in context. She's just written a letter to European Council President Donald Tusk. I've got it here in front of me, where she's asking for that extension, as you said, until June the 30th. Now, this is a bit of a bombshell because this means if there is this extension, Britain would have to participate in these European elections, which begin at the end of May. And that has been one of the red lines all along. And she's been facing a massive backlash, obviously, from the more hardline Brexiteers within her party who will not, very likely accept this. There's also been a number of resignations already that have taken place due to her budging on these red lines. So who knows where this is going to go. Now, in this letter, she says, it is frustrating that we have not yet brought this process to a successful and orderly conclusion. So once again, expressing her own frustration at the way this process has been drawn out now for nearly 3 years. And that she says the United Kingdom government remains strongly committed to organising this Brexit process. Now, her hope, of course, is to still manage to get her withdrawal deal passed. But as you know, it's failed already 3 times in a meaningful vote. So who knows where this is heading?
European leaders have been asked again and again, be patient with Theresa May, particularly from the European Commission. Is there any indication that those now cross-party talks could see this being resolved ahead of June 30th?
2 very important things you've just mentioned there, Rosie. Yes, so will this pass with these cross-party talks? Now, Theresa May has been talking with Jeremy Corbyn intensely, trying to push ahead. Now, the first days of talks, these were said to be by Jeremy Corbyn inconclusive, so we don't really know where they're going, but they do seem to be making progress. Now, Jeremy Corbyn has put forward the issue once again of this second referendum, a very thorny issue again, not only for Theresa May and her party, but also for Labour. Now, would this extension actually mean that that could be now moving higher up in the agenda as a possibility of something that might take place, putting a deal to a vote again in Britain? Again, such a difficult issue. But you mentioned the EU leaders. Now, anything that happens is going to have to be ratified by the European Council of 27 member states. And who knows what they are going to agree upon, because there is this frustration amongst EU leaders. So that is also a major question in point.
Isabel Kumar, thank you ever so much. As we are telling you, this is developing. So let's turn now to get the view from Brussels with Euronews correspondent Maeve McCon. How's this gone down already in Brussels? Has there been any immediate reaction, Maeve?
Well, as you said, it's just developing, so I haven't seen any immediate reactions coming out of the European Council, the European Commission or the European Parliament for the moment. But Isabel said that this is a bit of a bombshell, and indeed it will be a bit of a bombshell. It'll take a little bit of time to digest here among EU leaders and among various EU officials working for the various institutions, because, of course, what we've been hearing for a long time is they do not want to see the United Kingdom jeopardise, is how one official put it, the upcoming European elections. They don't want to see these elections overshadowed by the topic of Brexit. And they also don't want to see what one official said to me is a rolling cliff edge scenario where constantly the UK needs to be granted an extension. So I do not think there will be a big appetite to see the UK granted an extension until the end of June. What we're hearing that Donald Tusk might be offering an extension of 1 year, for example, and that's something that he might be proposing to the various ambassadors and diplomats and heads of state when they gather next week in Brussels. Because as you know, on the calendar here in Brussels is an emergency Brexit summit. It'll be taking place next Wednesday. Theresa May will of course be in the room as well with the 27 heads of state and the head of the Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker. And by Monday, this Monday, the EU side wanted a bit of clarity on what exactly the British side were to ask for so that ambassadors could get ready for that summit. So it'll be a wait and see scenario. They will digest this letter, digest this information, and then get ready to take the step forward. But one thing's been clear from the start here, and there's no interest in having a no-deal scenario. There's an interest in accommodating and making sure that the UK can leave in an orderly fashion. But that said, there's neither an appetite to allow for the UK to overshadow these European elections that only come about 5 times a year. There's very much a feeling that these shouldn't be overshadowed by this. So it'll be certainly a wait-and-see scenario. I'm sure we'll have a lot of reactions throughout the day here. And of course, when the European Commission briefs the press at noon.
Maeve, we're hearing that France is considering this request. Macron's someone before who's shown that he is really impatient with this Brexit process, urging it for it to be faster. We've heard Tusk saying you could have a long extension. Now Theresa May saying, can we have a shorter one? You know, how likely is it that this shorter extension might be granted?
Well, again, it will be up to the heads of state when they get in the room. They'll be meeting here in Brussels next Wednesday to discuss this. One thing we know is they do not want to see a no deal. They do not want to see the United Kingdom crash out of the European Union on the 12th of April. That would be a lose-lose scenario, Michel Barnier has said many, many times. He's the chief Brexit negotiations, and countries that would be set to lose majorly would be countries like Ireland, like the Netherlands, and like Germany. And that's why we saw Angela Merkel, the German Chancellor, fly to Dublin last night. She was hosted by Leo Varadkar, the Irish Taoiseach, and she said she would do all that she could do, all that was in her hands to make sure that this finished in an orderly way and a solution would be found. So there will definitely be an appetite in the room among EU leaders to make sure that there is a solution that suits all. But the fact of the matter is there's been a sense of Brexit fatigue because, of course, what we're hearing here in Brussels constantly is that withdrawal agreement needs to be backed in order for some sort of extension to, of course, be granted as well. So we'll really have to wait and see what comes out of those talks. As you see as well, France is making their point, other countries will have their points, all will be looking out for their own interests and putting, of course, the interests of the European Union 27 first. But that said, also trying to cater for the United Kingdom.
Well, in terms of catering for the United Kingdom, obviously the European elections are coming up in May. This potential delay that Theresa May has asked for, what impact is that going to have on Britain's involvement in those elections?
Well, according to this letter, I understand that in that letter she also specifies that would mean that the UK would also be getting involved in those elections. And many MEPs have said that would be absurd. If an outgoing EU member state would be participating in elections, it doesn't really make sense. But legally, of course, they would be obliged to take part in those elections. And that means that they would have to get their lists ready, ASAP, in fact, because it's in the middle of April when all those names need to be ready and the work needs to start. So, of course, if there was an extension, would mean that the UK would participate in those elections, but then of course the MEPs would be outgoing. So it's all very confusing, it's all very unprecedented. This is the first time that a member state has asked to leave the EU. It's the first time we've seen this so-called Article 50 triggered, which has a period legally of 2 years, and that's why we've talked so much about that 31st of March deadline. We saw the EU leaders grant an extension until the 12th of April a couple of days ago, so that is the new date set on the table, but it looks like now there could be another extension. But what we're hearing now from officials from Donald Tusk is they would like to see a longer extension as opposed to a shorter extension, and that would mean, of course, that the UK could participate in those elections. MEPs could come to Brussels and Strasbourg for a longer period, for over a year, and that would give enough time for the UK to decide on what kind of Brexit they want and then make sure that they had a transitional period for 1 or 2 years so that they could then exit in a more orderly fashion.
Maeve, live from Brussels, thank you ever so much. I'm joined now by Simon Usherwood. He's Deputy Director for the think tank, The UK in a Changing Europe. Well, certainly changing, I think we can agree on that. What do you think of Theresa May's proposal to say, OK, we've had one extension, now what about this other one? Likely prospect that she'll get it?
Well, I think it was always likely that she was going to be asking for another extension. It was clear that Parliament was still blocked here in the UK. What's maybe more surprising is that she's done it today. I think there was a feeling that perhaps she might wait until Monday to see a bit more how the talks with the Labour Party were going to play out. But she's decided that today is a good day to do it. It gives the European Council plenty of time ahead of their meeting on Wednesday to make some kind of decision and judgment about this. But I think for the EU, the question is going to be, there's a real desire to avoid a no-deal Brexit, but also they really want to make sure that there is a plan here in the UK for reaching some kind of resolution. And as you look at British politics in recent weeks and days, that plan hasn't really been forthcoming. So I think Theresa May has tried to be as conciliatory as possible. She's offered as much of a plan as she has available. So that means she's talking about the negotiations she's having with the Labour Party, process in Parliament for trying to reach an agreement. And also, really importantly, she's saying that British elections for the European Parliament on the 23rd of May, the UK will put all the necessary framework of decisions of selecting candidates in place, although with an intention not to use those, because that was something that the EU had been very worried about at the time of the first extension request, that they didn't want to compromise the integrity of the European Parliament.
Simon, do you think the 30th of June is actually a realistic date to say we can get this all done by? Because European leaders might be thinking, you've asked for one extension, you haven't managed to deliver there, and now another, are we going to see a third, fourth, fifth?
Well, that's, I think, the real concern of the EU is that they have many more things to be getting on with apart from Brexit. Brexit is not the key issue for them. And the thought that they might keep on finding themselves talking on regular basis about this with one crisis to the next is not something that they really want to be doing. So I think what's likely to happen here is going to be that the EU is going to say, we offer you a long extension, maybe to the end of the year. That means you can do what Theresa May is suggesting in her letter, which is that if you finish the process early, you can leave earlier. But I think saying now we'll give you an extension to the end of June is more problematic than I think the EU is prepared to accept. So better to just say, here's a big block of time. You have lots of time to sort yourself out. Also, it's clear that one of the matters in the negotiations here in London is whether there's an option of a confirmatory vote, so another referendum. And if you have that, then you're going to need until the end of the year to run that process. So I think if there is an extension given, it's more likely to be a long one to avoid just this to and fro on an almost daily basis.
If that time period is something that Theresa May gets, clearly then the European elections are taking place. How ready and prepared are British politicians for that prospect?
Well, I think politicians are maybe have been thinking about it for a short period of time. I know that some parties have already started that process in the last few days just in anticipation of this. However, it's still a major undertaking. It's a national election. You need to get together lists of candidates. You need to sort out the ballot papers, the polling stations. So it does take some time to wind these things up to speed. I think the bigger question is, what will the British public think, where they might be listening to campaigning for an election that doesn't take place. And if it does take place, there's a real question mark about who they vote for. Is this an opportunity to give the government a kicking, which is what often happens in European elections, that government parties often do very badly? Or is it a moment to reaffirm other kinds of values? Will you see pro-Europeans trying to form new parties? Will you see hard Brexiters or no-dealers trying to do the same? You've got Nigel Farage with his new party, who certainly will be contesting this very hard. So there's a question both about the politicians, but I think also more importantly about the voters.
Simon Ashworth, thank you ever so much. Deputy Director for the think tank, the UK in a Changing Europe.